Hey guys, tonight we're going to drift back to a world without neon signs, without booking apps, and without the faintest hope of a comfy roadside motel. Imagine yourself stepping into the shoes, the very dusty, worn-through shoes of a poor peasant in the late Middle Ages. It's nightfall, the fields are dark, the wind is threading its fingers through your patched cloak, and you're hungry enough to consider gnawing on your own shoe leather. You've got miles to go before the next town. And here's the kicker: you probably won't survive this. Not because of dragons or sword fights, but because the journey itself is a gauntlet, cold, damp, dangerous, and full of places you really don't want to sleep. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And hey, tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is right now. I love picturing all of us scattered across the world, sharing this same sleepy little moment. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The first thing you'd notice setting out along a medieval road is how empty it feels. Villages are strung along the countryside like tiny beads on a very thin thread with long stretches of lonely track between them. That track is your lifeline, but it's also a place where the wrong person could be waiting for you. Robbers, desperate beggars, or just the wild, unpredictable mess of nature itself. Wolves still roamed in some regions. Deep puddles hid ankle-twisting stones, and in winter ice could glaze the road into a silent, bone-breaking trap. The poor didn't own sturdy wagons or fine horses to whisk them from place to place. If you were a humble farmer's son or a widow taking a basket of eggs to market 2 towns over, you walked. And when your legs gave out or darkness fell, you had to decide where to stay, which was rarely about comfort and always about survival. Sometimes you'd luck out and reach a village before the sun vanished. The houses weren't grand inns with clean sheets and steaming bowls of stew. They were simple timber or wattle and daub cottages, often shared with goats, chickens, and the lingering smell of yesterday's turnip stew. Knocking on a stranger's door was a gamble. You might be invited in, given a place on the floor near the hearth, or you might be turned away because there simply wasn't room. Space was precious, not just for sleeping, but for keeping out the biting cold. If no cottage would have you, there was always the church porch. In many medieval villages, the porch of the parish church offered a roof, and if you were lucky, a bench or two. It wasn't warm, but it was public enough that no one could accuse you of trespassing, and it might keep the rain from soaking you through. Of course, church porches came with their own hazards. Rats darted in the shadows. The stone floor leached heat from your bones. And if the local priest found you there in the morning, you might get a scolding about idleness sin or the need to find honest work. On the open road, far from the comfort of any village, you might find yourself sleeping in a hayrick. Farmers stacked hay in big, sweet-smelling mounds, and if you could burrow deep enough, it might keep you warmer than an open ditch. But hayricks were also home to insects and the occasional angry farmer who didn't appreciate strangers crushing his winter fodder. Another option, if your journey took you along a major route, was to look for a wayside cross or shrine. Pilgrims often gathered at these spots, especially near holy wells or popular chapels. In such places, travelers sometimes huddled together for warmth and a bit of safety in numbers. The conversations you might overhear in the darkness would be a strange blend of pious murmurs, snores, and whispered rumors about distant towns. In the rare event you stumbled upon a real roadside inn, things could be mixed. The cheapest accommodation might be just a spot on the common room floor. No bed, no blanket. Just the hard boards beneath you and the smell of ale seeping from the cracks. If you were truly broke, the innkeeper might let you sleep in the stable. You'd be sharing space with horses, their steaming breath clouding the air, and the rustle of straw under every shift of their hooves. Compared to a wet ditch, though it was luxury. But luxury for the medieval poor wasn't about softness, it was about survival. You needed to keep your clothes dry, your belly fed, and your belongings safe from thieves. You learned to wrap your meager possessions tightly, sometimes sleeping with them under your head like a makeshift pillow to keep light-fingered strangers from making off with your one extra shirt or the precious loaf of bread you'd been saving. Nighttime on the road was a test of all your senses. The faint glow of a distant fire might mean safety or trouble. The bark of a dog could be the warning cry of a village that didn't want strangers, or it could mean a farmyard with a warm buyer just waiting for you to slip in unnoticed. The sound of running water could guide you to a stream to quench your thirst, but also to low, damp ground that would chill you to the bone if you tried to sleep there. And then there was the fear, not the sharp, immediate fear of a sword at your throat, but the slow, gnawing dread that crept in as the darkness deepened. You didn't know if the rustle in the hedgerow was a fox or a man. You didn't know if the shadowy figure up ahead was a harmless pilgrim or someone who'd decided your patched cloak looked worth taking. So you walked as long as your legs would carry you, hoping for a safe hearth before your strength gave out. In this world, every night on the road was a small gamble with fate. Sometimes you won with a dry corner, a few coals for warmth, maybe even a crust of bread from a generous host. Sometimes you lost shivering alone in the open, praying for dawn. And so as you push onward tonight in your own mind's journey, you begin to understand for the poor peasant traveler, a place to stay wasn't a given. It was a victory. The road beneath your feet narrows now, dipping into a hollow lane where the hedges lean close their tangled arms, meeting overhead to form a dark green tunnel. The air is damp here, thick with the smell of earth, and last year's leaves slowly turning to soil. It's quieter too, so quiet you can hear your own breathing, and the slow creak of leather as your pack shifts on your shoulders. You know you won't make the next village before full dark. That means you must begin thinking about where you'll spend the night. The choice isn't about comfort that was left behind when you left your own hearth. It's about shelter enough to keep the cold wind from gnawing at your bones. The track eventually widens into a small clearing where two paths meet. There's a weather-worn wooden post here, its paint long faded, and nailed to it is a small crude cross. A sign of piety, yes, but also a faint promise such places sometimes draw the kindness of strangers. You spot the remains of a small fire nearby, just a charred ring of stones and the faint scent of ash. Someone else, perhaps another wanderer like you, rested here not long ago. But there's no one now, only the creeping coolness of evening and the soft drip of water from the trees. You could stay here, of course. There's enough open ground to spread your thin blanket if you had one. But the openness makes you uneasy. Anyone could see you from the path, and not everyone who travels by night is a friend. You imagine lying here, eyes half closed, listening to each rustle in the leaves, wondering if it's the tread of boots or the shuffle of paws. No. Better to keep walking until you find something with walls or at least shadows that hide you from sight. Your thoughts drift to the stories you've heard around village fires of wayfarers finding shelter in old barns, sometimes without the farmer's permission. Slipping into such a place requires stealth and luck. Not every barn is empty at night. And though the straw is soft enough compared to bare ground barns smell of animals and hard work, the sharp scent of manure, the dry tickle of chaff, the musty perfume of hay long stored. Still, there's warmth in those scents, and the promise of a roof above your head. For a peasant with sore feet and an empty stomach, that's worth more than gold. You push on, and as the light bleeds slowly from the sky, shapes change. A thicket of trees becomes a dark wall. A boulder at the roadside turns into the silhouette of a crouching man until you are nearly upon it. Your imagination is a restless companion now, but you keep going, and after another weary half hour, you see the blacker shadow of a low building hunkered at the edge of a field. It's a cottage, perhaps, or a shepherd's bothy. Smoke curls faintly from a hole in the roof, a good sign. Cautiously, you approach. If you're lucky, the shepherd is inside tending a small fire. If he's alone and in a good mood, you might be invited to share the warmth, perhaps offered a corner of the floor by the hearth. But if he's already sharing his shelter with his own kin or workers, there will be no space for you, and the best you can hope for is a nod toward the nearest stand of trees. That's the way of the road. Hospitality is not endless. Every host must think first of their own. You knock lightly twice. The door creaks open to reveal a weathered face lit by firelight. The man studies you in silence, the way your clothes hang the mud on your boots, the thinness of your cheeks. After a moment, he steps aside just enough for you to slip in. The relief is a physical thing, like the first sip of water after a long thirst. Inside, it's close and smoky, the air filled with the mingled scents of wool wood smoke and mutton stew. A pot simmers over the fire. The shepherd gestures toward a stool. You sit careful not to take up too much space. In exchange for a few words of news from the road and a promise to leave by dawn, you're granted a slice of coarse bread and a place on the floor. It's hardly luxury. The floorboards are uneven, and there's a steady draft sneaking under the door. But the glow of the fire and the hum of human presence wrap around you like an old patched quilt. You are grateful, deeply so, because you know how much worse it could be. For not every night's shelter comes from kindness. Many poor travelers resort to the ruins that dot the countryside, crumbling abbeys, roofless chapels, abandoned mills. Such places are easy to enter, but harder to endure. The wind slides freely through broken walls. Owls and bats claim the upper reaches. Weeds push up through the floor. There's safety of a sort. In these ruins, no one cares enough to drive you out. But they are also lonely, haunted spaces where every echo of your movement seems louder than it should be. And if all else fails, there's the forest. It's not the forest of fairy tales, bright with singing birds and sunlit clearings. This is a dense, tangled wilderness where branches claw at your clothes and roots trip your tired feet. Finding a safe place to lie down here means searching for a hollow log or a dry patch under a leaning pine or a shallow cave in the hillside. You must avoid low ground where mist and damp settle and stay alert for the sound of breaking twigs, sometimes a deer, sometimes something more dangerous. You recall one night months ago when you had no choice but to sleep in the open woods. The ground was cold and unyielding, and you woke often to the sound of rustling nearby. In the morning, you discovered the paw prints of a fox, only a few steps from where you'd lain. You told no one about it. Such things are simply part of a wanderer's life. But you carried the memory with you, another quiet reminder of the road's indifference. Tonight, though, you are luckier. You bed down on the shepherd's floor, your pack under your head, your body angled toward the fire. The flicker of the flames paints shifting shadows on the low ceiling. Outside, the wind sighs across the hills. Your stomach is still hollow, but not entirely empty. And though the boards beneath you are hard, they are dry. That's enough. You let your eyes close, knowing the road will be waiting in the morning, ready to test you again. You wake before the sun, though it's hard to say whether it's the faint gray light filtering through the shutters or the stiffness in your back that rouses you. The fire has burned down to a dull orange glow, the embers quietly settling in their bed of ash. The shepherd is already up, moving about the room in soft, deliberate steps. You rise, roll your shoulders to work out the night's aches, and thank him for the shelter. He nods in that understated way of men used to giving without ceremony. There's no drawn-out farewell, the road is calling, and both of you know it. Stepping outside, the morning air bites at your cheeks. The grass is heavy with dew, each blade bending under its cool burden. A mist curls low over the fields, blurring the line between earth and sky. Your breath drifts in small clouds before you, and the first sounds of the day, a distant cockcrow, the creak of a cart axle, remind you that the world never truly sleeps, even when you do. Your feet find the road again, the ruts damp and glistening from the night's moisture. You keep a steady pace, aware that the next safe place to rest could be many hours away. You've learned the road's quiet lesson: never assume the day's journey will end in comfort. Always keep an eye out for potential shelter, even in full daylight. By mid-morning, the track leads you past a low stone-walled farmyard. An old woman stands near the gate, scattering grain for a clucking cluster of hens. Her sharp eyes catch you before you can pass unnoticed. Where you bound, she calls, voice rough with age. You answer politely, giving the name of your next intended stop. She squints, sizing you up. Then, with a faint nod, she gestures to the well in the yard. The water is cool, fresh, and alive with the taste of stone and rain. You drink deeply, splash your face, and thank her. She doesn't invite you in. Perhaps she's wary of strangers, but her brief kindness gives you the small lift you need to keep going. Even in a hard, guarded world, there are moments when generosity slips quietly between the cracks. Hours pass. The sun climbs, warming the road, until the damp earth begins to release its scent, rich, loamy, comforting, in a strange way. You pass a cluster of cottages, but their silent shutters drawn. Most folk are in the fields at this hour. You resist the urge to linger. Without an invitation, you are just a shadow moving through their lives. Later, you find yourself on a causeway stretching across a marshy expanse. The air is still, and the water lies in mirror-like pools among the reeds. Insects hum softly, and the only sound of your passage is the muted thud of your boots on the packed earth. Out here, there is nowhere to hide, nowhere to rest, just the long, exposed ribbon of the road. You remember tales of travelers caught on such causeways at dusk, their only choice to lie down in the open, wrapping themselves in their cloaks against the chill and praying that the night passes quietly. You push the image aside and focus on the thought of reaching higher ground. By late afternoon, you do. The road climbs into low, rolling hills dotted with gorse and hawthorn. A stone cross stands at a junction, its edges worn smooth by centuries of wind and rain. Beneath it, the grass is flattened in patches, signs that others have paused here. You sit for a moment, stretching your legs, feeling the pull in your calves. A scrap of bread from your pack fills the hollow in your stomach, though it does little to satisfy. As the day wanes, you begin the familiar search again. There's no village in sight, no farm close enough to risk approaching. But you remember a trick learned from other wanderers: follow the line of a stream. Water draws life, not just wild creatures, but people too. Where there's a stream, there may be a mill or a cluster of huts or even a fisherman's shack. And where there's a roof, there's at least the hope of shelter. Sure enough, as twilight deepens, you hear the soft rush of running water. You follow it until you come to a low wooden structure straddling the stream. It's a small mill, its wheel turning lazily in the current. Smoke curls from a vent in the roof. Someone is home. You knock, and after a pause, a stout man in a leather apron appears. His expression is guarded, but not hostile. You explain your situation, keeping your tone respectful. Perhaps it's the simple truth of your appearance, weary eyes, dust-grimed hands, that softens him. He lets you into a cramped but warm interior where the smell of fresh ground grain hangs in the air. You share a few words about the road ahead, and he offers you a corner near the sacks of flour. The floor is cool and hard, but you know well enough by now that a roof and four walls are treasures not to be dismissed. As darkness folds over the hills outside, you make yourself small in your corner, tucking your belongings close. You listen to the soft hiss of the mill stream outside and the rhythmic creak of the wheel as it turns in the water. The sound becomes a lull, each repetition smoothing away the edges of your thoughts. You think of those less fortunate tonight, the ones in the open fields, in the dripping ruins under the restless trees, and your gratitude deepens. Before sleep takes you, you reflect on how much of a peasant traveler's life is spent in uncertainty. Each morning you rise with no guarantee of where you will lie that night. Each evening is a small negotiation with the world, sometimes with people, sometimes with the land itself, to grant you a space, however humble, where you can close your eyes without fear. That negotiation never truly ends. It is the rhythm of the road, as steady and unyielding as the tread of your own feet. The miller wakes early before the stars have faded. You sense him moving about, even before your eyes open. The faint thump of footsteps, the creak of the door, the rush of cool air as he steps outside. You linger a moment longer in the quiet corner, letting your body adjust to the day's first chill. But there's no point in overstaying your welcome. A traveler's gratitude is best expressed in lightness, rising early, leaving quietly, and not making the host regret their choice. You step out into a world still wrapped in gray. The stream chatters softly beside you, its voice bright against the hush of the fields. A mist hangs low over the water, blurring the edges of everything. Your breath joins it, curling away as you make your way back to the road. The first stretch is easy walking, firm ground. The air sharp, but not biting, and for a time you let your mind wander. The thought crosses your mind, what if today's road holds no shelter at all? It's happened before. Once in a season, when the days were shorter, you misjudged the distance between villages and found yourself caught in the open with night falling fast. The land offered no barns, no cottages, no inviting glow of hearth smoke in the distance. You had to sleep on a patch of bare earth beside a low stone wall, your cloak pulled tight against a sky that seemed to press its cold weight down upon you. You woke often, teeth chattering, your limbs stiff and aching. By dawn, you felt older by years. The memory lingers as a quiet warning. The morning passes under a pale sun, and by noon you're approaching a stretch of woodland. The road here is rutted and uneven, the shadows of the trees making a shifting mosaic over the path. You pause at the edge, listening. Forests can be both refuge and trap. Their dense canopy offers cover from prying eyes good for hiding when you need to camp in the open, but also conceals the approach of anyone or anything that might mean you harm. Stepping beneath the boughs, the air changes. It's cooler, damper, rich with the smell of moss and leaf rot. Your footsteps are softened by a carpet of fallen needles and leaves. Somewhere above, a bird calls once, then falls silent. You move steadily, keeping an eye out for the sort of natural hollows or sheltered clearings that could serve as a last resort sleeping place. There are a patch of level ground, behind a ring of hawthorn, the dry underside of a great fallen oak, but you pass them by for now. The day still holds light, and you've learned that pressing on often brings better luck. By late afternoon, the road dips toward a narrow valley. A thin stream runs along its base, and you follow it toward the faint sound of human voices. Soon, a small cluster of huts comes into view. They're rough structures, their walls patched with wattle and mud, the roofs low and uneven. Smoke drifts from a few chimneys. A couple of children watch you from the doorway of one hut, their eyes wide and cautious. You approach slowly, offering a polite greeting. One of the adults, a wiry man with weather-cracked skin, steps forward. You explain your need, not expecting much. Poor folk have little enough for themselves. But he listens, glances toward the sky, and finally jerks his head toward an empty lean-to at the edge of the settlement. Out of the wind, there, he says simply. The lean-to is hardly more than a roof of branches propped against a low wall, but it's dry and shielded from the gusts sweeping down the valley. You thank him and settle in, arranging your pack to serve as both pillow and guard for your belongings. As you rest, you hear the rhythms of village life around you, the crackle of cooking fires, the murmur of voices, the occasional bark of a dog. It's not warmth exactly, but the nearness of people is its own kind of comfort. Later, one of the women brings you a small bowl of thin stew. You eat slowly, savoring each bite of root vegetable and the faint trace of salt. Food shared with strangers is never taken for granted on the road. You nod your thanks, but words feel too small to hold the weight of your gratitude. Night falls, and you draw your cloak tighter. The roof above you creaks in the wind, but holds. The air smells faintly of wood smoke, and the ground beneath you is mercifully dry. You think of the inns you've passed in larger towns, crowded, noisy places, where the poorest travelers sleep in common rooms or on stable floors. There you'd at least be indoors, but indoors can be dangerous too. Thieves, drunken brawls, the spread of sickness in cramped quarters. Sometimes the open air feels safer. And so you lie awake for a while, listening to the night noises of the settlement. A baby's cry quickly hushed. The shifting of animals in their pens. The low murmur of voices fading as the fires die down. Eventually, even these small sounds fade, leaving only the sigh of the wind through the valley. Your thoughts drift to all the nameless travelers who have passed this way before you, each seeking a patch of shelter in a world where shelter is never guaranteed. The road teaches you to value what others overlook. The lee of a wall, a dry hollow under a bank, the accidental kindness of a stranger. These become the markers of safety. You begin to see the land not just as fields and woods and villages, but as a map of possible havens, each with its own risks and rewards. It's a way of looking that never truly leaves you. Even years from now, you'll find yourself glancing at a hedgerow or a ruined barn and thinking, there. That would do if I had to. Tonight, you rest in your borrowed corner of the valley, the simple lean-to holding off the wind, the earth beneath you firm but not unkind. Sleep comes slowly but surely, and when it does, it wraps you in a dream, where the road is short, the nights are warm, and a door always opens when you knock. You wake in the lean-to to find the valley hushed under a pale dawn sky. The air is still and cool, heavy with the scent of damp earth. Your joints complain as you sit up. The stiffness of sleeping on hard ground is an old companion by now. You fold your thin cloak, stow your few belongings, and step out into the settlement. The huts are quiet smoke only just beginning to rise from a few chimneys. You give a nod of thanks to the wiry man who offered you shelter. He returns it with a grunt, already busy mending a wooden tool. The road draws you on. You climb out of the valley, the morning mist falling away behind you, and the land opens into a patchwork of fields and hedges. Your shadow stretches long across the rutted track, and the only sound is the steady rhythm of your boots. The day feels calm, but the road is never predictable, a fact you've learned to respect. By mid-morning, you reach a crossroads marked by a weather-stained shrine. A small figure of a saint, its features worn smooth, watches over the meeting of the paths. Offerings, a few coins, a sprig of herbs, a wooden charm lie at its base. You pause a moment, tracing the shape of the crossroads in your mind. One path leads deeper into open countryside, the other toward a low rise where you think you can see rooftops. Your feet choose the rooftops. The hope of a warm meal and perhaps a place to sleep always pulls stronger than the open fields. The rise is steeper than it looked, and by the time you crest it, the sun is high. Before you lies a small market hamlet, its single street lined with timbered houses and a scattering of stalls. You pass through slowly, catching snatches of conversation, the clatter of pots, the bleating of goats. You're careful not to linger too long in one place. Strangers attract notice, and not all of it welcome. Near the center of the hamlet stands a small tavern. The sign creaks in the wind, the paint faded, but the smell of baking bread drifts from the open door. Inside, it's dim and smoky, with a handful of locals hunched over mugs. The innkeeper glances up as you enter. You've been here before in spirit, if not in fact the sort of place where a poor traveler might trade a few coins for a seat by the fire, or if coins are scarce, for a night in the stable. You order the cheapest meal, a slab of coarse bread, a small wedge of cheese, and a mug of small beer. It's enough to steady you for the day's walk. When you quietly ask about lodging, the innkeeper shakes his head at the idea of a free bed, but mentions the stable. It's dry, he says, and warmer than the road. You nod. You've slept in worse. But with the day still young, you decide to press on. The road beyond the hamlet curves through a shallow valley flanked by orchards heavy with fruit. The air smells faintly sweet, and the hum of bees follows you. You pass a boy perched on a ladder picking apples into a basket. He glances down at you, but says nothing. The orchard's shade is tempting soft grass beneath dappled sunlight above, but you know better than to rest where you might be mistaken for a thief. By late afternoon, clouds have thickened. A wind picks up, pushing at your back. You pass a half-ruined chapel, its roof collapsed, its altar open to the sky. For a moment, you consider it as a shelter, at least from the wind. but the floor is littered with debris, and the broken walls offer little protection from rain. You move on, glancing often at the darkening sky. The rain starts gently at first, a fine mist settling into your cloak. Soon, it's steadier, the drops finding their way down your collar. The road turns slick, and the fields around you blur into gray. You scan for any sign of shelter, a copse of trees, a barn, even a hedgerow thick enough to break the wind. At last, you spot a low, squat building, a short distance off the road. It's a byre, a cattle shelter. Its wooden sides weathered, its roof patched in places with thatch. You push the door open to find the sweet-sour scent of straw and livestock. A few cows turn their heads toward you, eyes calm, jaws moving slowly. You choose a patch of clean straw in the corner out of the animal's way and settle in. The warmth in here is different from the warmth of a hearth-heavy animal alive. You pull your cloak tight, letting the low rumble of the cow's breathing soothe you. As the rain drums on the roof, you think about how such shelters, humble, practical, often overlooked, have saved countless travelers. No one writes songs about sleeping in a byre, but for the poor peasant on the road, it's as close to luxury as you can hope for on a wet night. The straw softens the floor, the roof keeps you dry, and the animal's presence is oddly comforting. The hours stretch quietly. Outside, the storm strengthens, but in here the sound is muted, a steady lull that seeps into your bones. You doze, waking now and then, to the shifting of the cows, the rustle of straw, the faint creak of the roof. You've learned to take such nights as gifts, no matter how small they may seem. When the rain finally eases, it's deep into night. You don't stir. The thought of stepping into the damp darkness holds no appeal. You'll rise with the first light, thank the unseen farmer in your heart, and continue. For now you let yourself drift, held by the warmth and the steady rhythm of life around you. The road will wait until morning. You rise before the first streaks of daylight slip under the byre's roof. The cows are already stirring their heavy bodies, shifting in the straw, their breaths making pale clouds in the chill air. You sit up, brushing bits of straw from your cloak, and take a moment to savor the warmth you've borrowed through the night. For a poor traveler, that borrowed warmth feels like a blessing, even if it comes with the faint smell of livestock clinging to your clothes. The farmyard outside is quiet but not still. A rooster calls once sharp and insistent, and somewhere in the dark, a dog gives a lazy bark. You step carefully across the muddy yard, slipping back onto the road, with a silent thanks to the unseen farmer whose animals sheltered you. The morning begins gray, the air fresh from the night's rain. Puddles fill the ruts in the track, their surfaces reflecting scraps of pale sky. You tread lightly around them, your boots still damp from yesterday. The land smells of wet earth, crushed grass, and the faint sweetness of rotting leaves, the scent of a world on the cusp between seasons. As the light strengthens, you see smoke curling from chimneys far ahead. Another village, perhaps larger than the last, lies along the road. You keep your pace steady, feeling the tug of curiosity. Larger villages sometimes have more options: a tavern, a church with a generous warden, maybe even a guild hall where strangers can find a meal for a few coins. When you reach the first houses, the village is already stirring. Doors stand open to let in the morning air, and the rhythmic clack of a loom drifts from one cottage. A woman passes with a basket of washing on her hip, glancing at you just long enough to mark you as a stranger before moving on. It's not unkindness exactly, just the wariness of people who know how thin their own margin of survival is. You make your way to the center, where the village green stretches out in a rough, uneven square. A church stands at one edge, its stonework darkened by centuries of weather. The porch is deep and shadowed, the kind of place you've used before for shelter. But with the day still young, you push on toward the tavern. Inside the tavern smells of wood smoke yeast and the faint tang of ale. The keeper, a stocky man with arms like hams, eyes you briefly before going back to wiping a tankard. You order a cup of small beer and sip it slowly, letting its mild bitterness wake you fully. When you ask about lodging, the answer is the one you expect: a shake of the head for a free bed, but a nod toward the stable out back if you're willing to share space with the inn's mule. You thank him and file the information away for nightfall. For now, the road still calls. You step back into the light, adjusting your pack, and head out of the village. By midday, the clouds have broken, and the sun spills over the fields in soft gold. The track here winds between low hills, their slopes dotted with sheep. A shepherd leans on his crook at the crest of one, watching his flock with patient eyes. You lift a hand in greeting, and he returns it with a faint nod. You've learned that such nods can mean a great deal: a quiet acknowledgement of shared life in the open, a small recognition that you are both creatures of the land in your own ways. The road bends, and you find yourself descending toward a river. A narrow wooden bridge spans it, its planks worn smooth by countless feet and hooves. You pause midway to watch the water slide past, quick and bright in the sun. Following the river with your eyes, you notice a small stone building tucked against its bank. A mill, perhaps, though smaller than most. A weathered bench sits outside, inviting in its simplicity. You walk on, but the image of that bench lingers in your mind. It's the kind of place you might return to if the day ends without finding better shelter. Mills, like barns, have a certain reliability. People are always drawn to where food is made, and where people gather, there's at least a chance of kindness. The afternoon stretches long and quiet. Fields give way to patches of woodland, the air cooling under the shade. You notice an old track leading away from the main road, barely more than 2 ruts choked with grass. It curves out of sight behind a stand of oaks. Curiosity tugs at you again sometimes. These forgotten ways lead to hidden farmsteads, old hermitages, even disused hunting lodges. Following it, you soon catch the scent of wood smoke. The track ends at a crumbling stone cottage, its roof sagging, but still mostly intact. A small garden overrun with weeds clings stubbornly to life around it. You approach cautiously, calling a greeting. After a moment, a bent old man appears in the doorway. His face is lined like weathered bark, his eyes pale and watchful. You explain yourself, a traveler no trouble meant seeking a dry place for the night. He studies you for a long moment before stepping aside. The interior is dim, smelling of herbs and damp stone. There's a small fire burning in a hearth, blackened by decades of use. He gestures toward a wooden stool. You sit, feeling the stiffness of the seat, but grateful for the warmth. The evening passes in quiet company. The old man speaks little, though once he asks where you've come from, and again where you're headed. You answer as best you can, your words brief. He nods, seemingly satisfied. At last he lays a folded blanket on the floor near the hearth. There, he says simply, "It's a better bed than most, the fire close enough to keep the chill away, the blanket soft from years of wear." You stretch out, the flicker of the flames dancing across the low ceiling. Outside, the wind rises, rattling the shutters, but the old stone walls hold firm. You let the warmth and safety sink into you, knowing such nights are rare. Before sleep claims you, you think again of the road, how it offers no promises, only possibilities. Each day is a search for shelter, each night a reminder that even the poorest roof is a treasure when it keeps the rain off your face. Tomorrow you will walk again, but tonight you rest. The old man is up before you, moving about the cottage in the dim gray light of early morning. You hear the slow scrape of a chair against the floor, the clink of a pot on the hearth. When you open your eyes, the fire is already coaxed back to life, sending out thin ribbons of smoke and warmth. He doesn't speak as you rise, there's no need. You fold the blanket neatly and set it on the stool, offering a quiet thanks. He nods once, his lined face unreadable, and you step out into the cool morning. The air smells of damp earth and wood smoke. A light frost sparkles on the grass, crunching softly beneath your boots. As you follow the narrow track back toward the main road, you glance over your shoulder, once seeing the small cottage sink slowly into the folds of the land until it disappears. You know you may never pass this way again, but you carry the memory of that night, the fire's warmth, the old man's silent generosity like a hidden talisman. The road today winds through rolling fields rimmed with hedgerows. Sparrows dart in and out of the tangled branches, their wings flashing briefly in the low sun. You walk steadily, the morning quiet settling around you like a cloak. Travel in these hours feels different. The dangers of the night are behind you, but the uncertainties of the coming evening are already forming, waiting for their turn. By midday, you come upon a roadside cross. Its base is worn, the stone lichen-spotted, but the figure carved into it is still visible, a traveler's blessing of sorts. A small wooden bench sits nearby, and you lower yourself onto it, stretching your legs. From here, the road dips toward a small river, its surface gleaming under the winter-pale sun. You know rivers well enough to follow their course when you can. They often lead to settlements, mills, or bridges where human life gathers. Sure enough, following the river for a mile brings you to a cluster of buildings, a mill, a blacksmith's forge, and half a dozen cottages. A narrow track runs between them, leading to a wooden footbridge. You catch sight of a woman drawing water from the river, her skirts bunched in one hand. She watches you warily at first, then offers a faint nod. You return it, stepping aside to let her pass. There's no obvious tavern here, no church large enough to have a porch worth sheltering in. But near the edge of the cluster stands a small outbuilding, its door ajar. Inside you glimpse neatly stacked sacks of grain and the faint glimmer of straw. A storeroom, perhaps. You consider asking permission to sleep there if night falls before you find a better option. Such spaces can be safe enough, though, always with the risk that you'll be turned away or worse, accused of theft. The day stretches on the road, drawing you away from the river and into a stretch of heathland. The wind moves more freely here, carrying the scent of heather and the faint tang of distant smoke. Clouds gather slowly in the west, promising another night of damp. You scan the horizon for any sign of shelter, a barn roof, a small copse, even a shepherd's hut. But the heath is empty, rolling on and on beneath the restless sky. By late afternoon, the first drops of rain begin to fall. They patter softly on your hood, darkening the wool. You quicken your pace, knowing that wet clothes mean a colder night, no matter where you end up sleeping. At last, the road brings you to a low stone wall enclosing a small farmstead. Beyond the wall, a pair of cattle stand under a rough-roofed shelter, their hides darkened by rain. You hesitate before approaching. Farmyards can be tricky places for strangers. Some farmers welcome travelers out of a shared understanding of hardship, while others see them only as mouths to feed or potential thieves. You call out from this gate, your voice nearly swallowed by the wind. After a moment, a man appears in the doorway of the farmhouse. He looks you over with the cautious eye of someone weighing risk against compassion. "Storm coming," he says, finally glancing at the darkening sky. "You can have the loft in the byre if you're quiet." You thank him and follow his gesture toward the building. Inside, the air is warm with the scent of animals and hay. A ladder leads to the loft, where bales are stacked high, and the roof beams form a low sheltering arch. You find a space near the far wall, the straw dry beneath you. It's almost cozy, the kind of place where you can burrow in and let the day's weariness slip away. The rain strengthens outside, drumming on the roof in a steady rhythm. Below, the cattle shift and snuffle their presence, grounding you in the moment. You eat a small piece of bread from your pack, washing it down with a swallow of water. It's not much, but it takes the edge off your hunger. Lying back in the straw, you listen to the sounds around you. The rain, the slow chewing of the cattle, the creak of the beams in the wind. These are not the sounds of danger, but of life going on as it always has. You think about how many travelers before you must have lain in places like this, grateful simply to be dry. No bed, no blanket, no lock on the door, and yet, for the night, enough. Sleep comes more easily here than in many places. Perhaps it's the softness of the straw, or the knowledge that a roof separates you from the storm. Or perhaps it's the simple truth that the road, for all its uncertainty, sometimes grants you a gift, just when you need it most. When you wake, it will be to another day of walking, another search for shelter. But tonight, in this quiet loft, you are reminded that even the poorest traveler can sometimes find a corner of peace in the vast, unpredictable world. Morning comes as a faint silver glow pressing against the edges of the loft's thatched roof. The air up here is cool but dry, scented with the mingled sweetness of hay and the warm musk of the cattle below. You lie still for a moment, listening to the slow, patient rhythm of their chewing, the occasional thump of a hoof against the packed earth floor. The rain has stopped, replaced by a hush that feels almost deliberate, as though the land is pausing to catch its breath after the night's storm. You descend the ladder quietly, boots landing with a muted thud on the earth below. The byre door stands slightly open, and pale morning light spills across the threshold. Outside, the world glistens, every fence post, every tuft of grass jeweled with droplets. A thin mist hangs low over the fields, and the air smells fresh, washed clean by the rain. The farmer is already at work, his back bent over a water trough. You thank him for the shelter, meaning it more than the words can carry. He gives a brief nod without looking up, the kind of response that says, "Your gratitude is understood, but doesn't need to be fussed over." You leave the farmyard quietly, returning to the road. The track ahead is soft underfoot, puddles glinting in the ruts. The early sun breaks through the mist in shards of gold, turning the wet fields into a patchwork of light and shadow. You walk with a steady rhythm, warmed by the movement, feeling the small but unmistakable lift that comes from starting the day dry. As the morning wears on, the land begins to change. The hedgerows thin, replaced by wide open commons, where sheep graze in loose clusters. You pass a shepherd wrapped in a heavy cloak, leaning on his crook. He raises a hand in greeting but doesn't call out. His dog watches you intently from his side, its eyes bright with quiet appraisal. You keep walking, aware that strangers are measured carefully in places like this. By midday, you crest a low ridge and see a cluster of roofs in the distance. The sight draws you on your steps, quickening despite the weight of your pack. Villages mean possibility, food, water, a patch of shelter, but also risk. You never know whether the welcome will be warm or wary. When you reach the outskirts, the first building you pass is a smithy. The sharp ring of hammer on iron rings, out-echoing between the low stone walls. Sparks leap briefly in the dim light as the smith works, his face set in concentration. He doesn't glance up as you pass, but you know he's aware of you. In a small place, nothing moves unseen. Farther in, you find the village green, a patch of uneven grass ringed by houses. A single tree stands at its center, its bare branches twisting against the sky. To one side, the church porch juts out in its simple stone dignity, a shadowed recess you recognize instantly as a possible refuge. But the sun is still high, and you have miles left in you before the day begins to fade. You stop at a small bakery, the smell of warm bread spilling into the street. Inside, a woman is drawing loaves from the oven, the crusts dark and crisp. You buy the cheapest one, dense and heavy in your hand, and step back into the light. Bread like this is both meal and companion. You break off a piece as you walk, tucking the rest into your pack. Leaving the village, the road narrows again, bordered by tangled hedges. The afternoon is mild, but clouds are beginning to gather far to the west. You've learned to read the sky as carefully as any map. Those clouds could mean rain before nightfall. You scan the countryside for anything that might serve as shelter. An hour later, you spot an old barn, its timbers weathered, its thatch patched but holding. The doors hang slightly ajar. You step closer, peering inside. It's empty, save for a few forgotten tools and the faint smell of hay lingering in the corners. The floor is swept clean, a sign it's still in use, though, perhaps only occasionally. It would make a fine place to wait out a storm, though you hesitate to claim it too soon. You decide to keep walking, hoping for something even better before nightfall. The road curves gently, dipping toward a small valley where a stream winds between rush-lined banks. You follow it until you see a low stone bridge, the kind built by hands long gone. On the far side stands a row of cottages, their gardens neat despite the season. You call a greeting to a man stacking firewood outside one of them. He glances up, measuring you in a single look, then nods toward the church at the edge of the cluster. If you've no coin, he says the porch is dry. It's advice you've heard before, but still you're grateful for it. You thank him and make your way to the church. The porch is deep, its flagstones worn smooth by generations of feet. You set your pack down and lean against the wall, letting the stone's coolness seep through your cloak. Evening comes slowly, the light thinning, until the first stars prick the sky. The village quiets, doors close. Smoke curls from chimneys. The murmur of voices fades behind walls. You settle yourself in a corner of the porch, your cloak wrapped tight. The stone beneath you is hard, but it's dry, and the arch overhead keeps the wind off your face. You eat the last of your bread, washing it down with a swallow of water. The night deepens the air, cooling sharply. Somewhere nearby, an owl calls a single low note that drifts across the dark. You think about the many nights like this that have passed before you, each one a thread in the endless fabric of travelers' lives. You close your eyes, letting the sounds of the village at night wash over you. Somewhere a dog barks once, then again. The wind shifts, carrying the faint scent of wood smoke and damp earth. You breathe it in slowly, letting your body sink into the stillness. It's not a warm bed, not even close, but it's a place to rest your bones, and in the life of a poor traveler, that's all you need to see the night through. You wake before the first hint of light touches the porch. The air is cold enough that your breath shows in faint puffs. The stone beneath you has leached the warmth from your body, and your back protests as you shift upright. For a moment, you sit still, watching the dark shapes of the cottages across the green. One by one, faint orange glows appear in their windows as fires are coaxed to life inside. You shoulder your pack and step out into the still sleeping village. The grass underfoot is wet with dew, soaking the edges of your boots. Somewhere nearby, a cockerel calls its cry, breaking the quiet, like a thrown pebble breaking the skin of a pond. You make your way back to the road, the sound of your own steps, oddly loud in the hush of morning. The day begins with a gentle climb. The hedgerows are bare, their tangled branches black against the paling sky. Here and there, frost clings stubbornly to the shaded side of a ditch. You pass a field where sheep graze silently, their breath steaming in the cold air. A shepherd watches from a gate leaning on his crook. You nod as you pass, and he gives the barest tilt of his head in return. By mid-morning, the road crests a hill, and you pause to take in the view. The land rolls away in soft waves dotted with clumps of woodland and the occasional glint of water. A narrow ribbon of smoke rises in the far distance, a village perhaps, or a lone farmhouse. Somewhere out there is where you'll need to find shelter before the day fades. The descent from the hill is slow, the path muddy in places from the recent rain. You skirt the worst of it, stepping from tuft to tuft of grass, your boots leaving dark imprints in the wet earth. The road narrows as it enters a shallow valley, the banks on either side crowding close. It feels quieter here, the wind stilled the sounds of the world muted. A few miles on, you come across a small wooden signpost, its letters faded but still legible. One arm points toward a market town too far for today, you judge. The other points to a hamlet you've never heard of. You choose the hamlet, hoping its smaller size will mean less suspicion of strangers. The path winds between low stone walls past fields where stubble from the last harvest stands in neat rows. The smell of damp straw drifts on the air. Soon you see the first thatched roofs, smoke curling lazily upward. The hamlet is little more than a handful of cottages gathered along a single lane. A shallow stream runs beside it, crossed by a single footbridge. You pause at the bridge, watching the water ripple over its stony bed. A woman passes with a basket on her arm, giving you a polite but guarded glance. You return it with a quiet nod. In such places, it's best to be neither too eager nor too aloof, just a passing figure who means no trouble. There's no tavern here, no visible inn, but near the far end of the lane stands a small stone building with a bell above its door. The church is humble, its porch shallow but still dry. You note it in your mind, a possible refuge if nothing else presents itself by nightfall. You decide to press on the road beyond the hamlet, bending through low, wooded hills. The light has taken on the mellow gold of late afternoon, and you know the day is shortening fast. You quicken your pace eyes, scanning for anything that might offer shelter. At last, you spotted a tumble-down barn standing at the edge of a field. Its walls lean slightly, and the thatch is patchy in places, but it still holds the shape of a shelter. You approach, pushing the door open, with a groan of old wood. Inside, the air is dry, carrying the faint, sweet scent of long-stored hay. A ladder leads to a loft where loose straw lies in uneven piles. You climb up, testing each rung before trusting your weight to it. The loft offers a view of the fields beyond through a narrow gap in the wall. You can see the last light bleeding away at the horizon, the sky deepening from gold to blue. It's as private as you're likely to get on the road, and that in itself is worth much. Settling into the straw, you take a small bite from the bread you've been carrying. It's gone tough in your pack, but it fills the hollow in your stomach. You wrap your cloak tight, tucking your belongings close against your side. Down below, a mouse rustles in the shadows, but otherwise the barn is quiet. As darkness settles, you lie back, the beams above you black against the dim glow of the sky. The air cools quickly, and you pull the straw closer around you. Outside, the wind stirs, rattling the loose thatch. You listen to it for a while, your mind drifting between wakefulness and sleep. You think about how the road teaches you to measure comfort differently. In another life, you might complain about the hardness of the floor, the draft through the wall, the stale bread in your hand. But now you count the dryness of the straw, the shelter of the roof, the solitude of the loft as blessings. You know that many tonight will be sleeping in the open, their cloaks soaked through their faces, turned toward the wind. The barn creaks softly in the night, its timbers shifting like an old man in his sleep. You close your eyes, letting the sounds settle around you. Tomorrow will bring another day of walking, another search for a corner of the world where you can rest your head. But for now, this is enough. The first thing you hear is the sigh of wind through the barn's loose thatch. It moves softly at first, then gathers strength, pressing against the walls, until the timbers give a slow, complaining groan. You shift in the straw, feeling the night's chill clinging to your cloak. The pale gray of early dawn seeps through the gaps in the roof, outlining the beams above you in cold light. You sit up slowly, brushing bits of straw from your hair and shoulders. The barn is still save for the occasional rustle from the mouse somewhere in the shadows below. You eat the last scrap of your bread, chewing slowly to make it last, and take a careful swallow of water. It's not much of a breakfast, but the road has taught you to be grateful for anything that fills the emptiness. Climbing down the ladder, you step out into the fields. The grass glistens with frost, crunching faintly under your boots. The sky is pale and cloudless for now, though a faint haze to the east hints that the weather may change before the day is done. Your breath trails in thin plumes as you set off along the rutted track. The morning passes in a quiet rhythm, the steady beat of your footsteps, the soft thud of boots on frozen ground, the occasional flutter of wings as a bird takes flight from the hedgerow. You pass no one for miles, just the silent company of fields and woods. Out here, you feel both free and exposed, a lone figure in a wide and watchful world. By midday, you reach a fork in the road. One path leads toward a distant village you can just make out through the haze. The other runs parallel to a river, its course marked by a line of bare willows. You choose the river road. Water means life, and life often means shelter. The river is slow-moving, its surface broken here and there by floating ice. The air smells faintly metallic clean, but edged with the chill that seeps from open water in winter. Following its curve, you pass a small fishing hut set back from the bank. Its roof is thatched, its walls patched with mismatched planks. You call out a greeting, but there's no answer. You pause at the door, knocking lightly. When no one comes, you peer inside. The hut is empty, the hearth cold, but it's tidy, a sign that someone still uses it, even if not today. You step back, debating whether to claim it for the night, if you find nothing better. A fishing hut is a mixed blessing, shelter from the wind, yes, but no guarantee against whoever might return to it after dark. The afternoon grows softer, the pale sun slipping behind a veil of thin cloud. You pass a copse of trees where the ground is dry and level beneath their branches. It would make a fair camp in warmer weather, but in the cold season, the open air bites too sharply. You keep walking, your eyes scanning for anything that promises both dryness and safety. Near sunset, you catch sight of smoke rising behind a low hill. You follow the scent of wood smoke until you come upon a small, weathered cottage standing alone at the edge of a pasture. Its shutters are open to the fading light, and a curl of steam drifts from the pot, balanced above the hearth inside. You knock gently. A woman appears, her hair tied back, her hands dusted with flour. She studies you with the measuring look of someone who has seen travelers before and knows the quiet hunger in their eyes. After a pause, she steps aside. By the fire, she says simply. The warmth is immediate and enveloping. You crouch near the hearth, stretching your fingers toward the flames. The air is thick with the scent of bread baking, and your stomach answers with a low, insistent growl. She notices, saying nothing, but soon places a small piece of bread in your hand. You eat slowly, the crust crackling between your teeth, the soft center still warm. When you ask carefully if you might rest in the barn for the night, she hesitates only briefly before nodding. In the loft, she says, "It'll keep the frost off you." The barn is close by its doors, creaking as you push them open. Inside, the scent of hay mingles with the faint, sweet smell of stored apples. You climb to the loft, finding a patch of loose straw near the back. Through a narrow gap in the boards, you can see the last blush of sunset bleeding out of the sky. Settling in, you feel the quiet satisfaction of knowing you'll be dry tonight. The barn's timbers groan gently in the cooling air, but they hold. You tuck your belongings under your head, drawing your cloak close. Below, the muffled sound of the woman's animals reaches you, the shifting of hooves, the soft rustle of straw. As night deepens, the cold seeps in, but not with the sharpness of the open air. Here, the loft holds a pocket of warmth enough to keep you from shivering. You let your breathing slow, your eyes tracing the rough lines of the roof beams above. You think of all the roofs you've slept under, church porches, buyers' mill lofts, the kindness of strangers' cottages, each one a brief island in the long current of the road. Tomorrow you will push on, seeking another. But for tonight, you let yourself rest in the small certainty of shelter, knowing that in a peasant's life such certainty is rare and worth holding close. You wake in the barn loft to the muffled clink of a pail and the low murmur of a voice below. The woman is tending to her animals, her words soft and rhythmic, meant more for their ears than yours. You lie still a moment, letting the warmth of the straw cling to you before sitting up. Through the narrow gap in the boards, dawn is a pale blush along the horizon, promising a cold but clear day. You climb down the ladder, careful not to startle the animals. The woman glances at you briefly, offering a small nod that carries no judgment, only acknowledgement. You thank her quietly, knowing that in the life of a traveler, such silent exchanges carry more meaning than 100 loud farewells. Stepping outside, the air is sharp and clean, the frost on the grass crunching faintly under your boots. The road waits like a ribbon of pale mud stretching toward the low hills. You adjust your pack, settle your cloak around your shoulders, and begin again. The morning walk is brisk, your body warming with each step. The fields around you are bare, their stubble dusted with frost. Crows wheel overhead, their calls harsh and lonely. A fox trots along a distant hedgerow, its red coat a flash of color against the muted land. The world feels wide and watchful, but for the moment, it's yours alone. By mid-morning, the road leads you to a small hamlet tucked against a fold in the hills. Smoke curls from a few chimneys, and the faint sound of a hammer rings out from somewhere within. You pass a low stone wall where a pair of children perch, swinging their legs and watching you with open curiosity. They don't speak, but their eyes follow you until you disappear around a corner. In the center of the hamlet stands a tiny chapel, its wooden door weathered but sturdy. The porch is shallow, but would offer some shelter in a pinch. You note it in the quiet way you've learned to catalog possible refuges without drawing attention to yourself. You pass a man splitting wood in front of a cottage. He pauses long enough to give you a curt nod, then turns back to his work. There's no tavern here, no visible sign of lodging, just the slow rhythm of a place where every face is known and yours is not. You decide not to linger. The road beyond climbs steadily winding between the low hills. The sky is bright now, though a thin wind snakes through the hollows, making you pull your cloak tighter. You walk steadily, the rhythm of your steps and the whisper of the wind, the only sounds for long stretches. By early afternoon, you crest another hill and see a scattering of farmsteads below each with its own patch of tilled land and a cluster of outbuildings. You make for the nearest, hoping for a refill of your water flask, if nothing more. The farmer meets you at the gate, his eyes narrowing slightly as he takes in your travel-stained clothes and tired face. You explain that you're passing through, asking if there's a well nearby. His gaze softens just a fraction, and he gestures toward a pump beside the barn. You drink deeply, the water cold enough to make your teeth ache. When you ask about shelter, his answer is cautious, but not unkind. There's an old shepherd's hut on the ridge, he says, pointing toward a rise beyond the fields. Empty most nights. You'll have a roof, though, not much else. You thank him and make your way toward the ridge. The path is narrow and rough, the grass long and tangled around your boots. The hut appears suddenly as you crest the rise, a squat round structure of stone with a conical roof built to withstand the wind. Its door hangs slightly askew, but it stands solid against the sky. Inside, the air is cool and smells faintly of damp stone. A low bench runs along one wall, and in the center is a small hearth blackened by years of use. There's no wood, no sign of recent occupation, but the place is dry and sheltered from the wind. You drop your pack onto the bench and sit, letting the quiet settle around you. From the doorway, you can see far across the valley. The fields are patchwork in the fading light, and the thin ribbon of the road gleams faintly in the distance. The world feels both vast and strangely close from up here. You eat a small portion of bread and cheese, chewing slowly as you watch the light begin to thin. As evening falls, the wind picks up, whistling around the edges of the hut. You tuck yourself into the corner farthest from the door, pulling your cloak close. The stone walls hold the cold, but they also block the worst of the gusts. You think of the many nights you've spent in more precarious spots under hedges and ruined walls curled behind stacks of firewood, and you're reminded that this humble hut is a luxury by comparison. The stars emerge slowly, pricking the sky one by one. The moon rises pale over the hills, casting a faint light through the crooked doorway. You listen to the wind, its voice shifting from low murmurs to sudden sharp cries as it sweeps around the hut. The sound is lonely, but it's also constant, and constancy is its own kind of comfort. You drift toward sleep with the knowledge that tomorrow will bring another stretch of road, another search for a place to lay your head. But tonight, the shepherd's hut is yours, and in the life of a poor traveler, that is enough. The wind has gentled by morning, though it still brushes against the shepherd's hut with a low, persistent murmur. You stir from your corner cloak, heavy with the night's chill, and sit up slowly. Through the crooked doorway, the world is washed in soft gray light. The hills roll away under a sky streaked faintly with the pink of sunrise. You step outside the cold air, pricking at your face, and take in the stillness. The valley below is hushed, dotted with slow-moving cattle and thin columns of smoke rising from far-off cottages. Your breath drifts upward in faint clouds as you shoulder your pack. The stone hut behind you looks small against the vast sweep of the land, a reminder of how fleeting your claim to any shelter truly is. The track down from the ridge is narrow, the grass wet with dew. You pick your way carefully, boots slipping once or twice on hidden stones. At the bottom, the road curves between frost-rimmed hedges, their bare twigs glinting in the morning light. You walk steadily, your body warming with movement, your mind already turning to the day's central question: where will I sleep tonight? Mid-morning brings you to a crossroads where a weather-worn post leans slightly to one side. One arm points toward a market town, the other to a village whose name you don't know. You choose the village. Smaller places tend to hold less suspicion for those who arrive on foot, with little to offer but their thanks. The path winds gently between fields, the soil dark and damp from recent rain. You pass a low stone wall where a pair of geese strut back and forth, their white feathers bright in the winter light. They hiss as you pass their eyes, sharp with suspicion, and you give them a wide berth. Soon the village comes into view, a scatter of thatched cottages, a small green, and at its heart a modest church. Smoke curls from several chimneys, carrying the scent of burning wood on the crisp air. You pass slowly along the lane, nodding to those who glance your way. A woman steps from her doorway, a bundle of sticks in her arms. She eyes you briefly, but says nothing. You pause at the church, noting the depth of its porch. It would serve in a pinch, though the stone floor would steal your warmth by the hour. Still, the thought lodges in your mind, a fallback, if nothing better comes along. Beyond the village, the road narrows again, flanked by bare trees, whose branches claw at the pale sky. The ground here is uneven, the ruts holding pockets of half-frozen water. You tread carefully, your gaze scanning for the telltale signs of human habitation. The straight line of a fence, the smoke from a chimney, the flash of a roof tile through the branches. By early afternoon, you come upon a cluster of farm buildings set back from the road. The yard is busy, a man forks hay into a cart. A boy drives a small flock of sheep through a gate. You approach slowly, calling a polite greeting. The man pauses, leaning on his fork, and listens as you ask if there's a place nearby where you might rest for the night. He considers a moment before nodding toward a long, low structure at the far edge of the yard. "Empty stall at the end," he says. "Out of the wind." You thank him sincerely and make your way to the building. Inside, the air is warmer than the open road, carrying the sweet, dry scent of old straw. The stall is bare, save for a scattering of chaff on the floor, but it's sheltered on 3 sides and open only to the yard. You set down your pack, feeling the relief of having at least a tentative answer to the day's question. Still, the day is not yet done. You walk back toward the road, deciding to explore a little before settling in. Sometimes a better option presents itself late in the day, a cottage door that opens to you, an outbuilding more snug than it first appeared. The lane leads you to a stand of trees where the ground is carpeted with leaves. Through the trunks, you spot the slant of a small wooden shed. Its door is ajar, and inside you find a stack of firewood and a bench along one wall. The air is dry and the roof appears sound. It would be a comfortable enough place to spend the night, but you hesitate to claim it without asking. You return to the farmyard and mention the shed to the man. He shakes his head. "That's for the wood," he says, "but you can sit there a while if you like." The answer is kind enough, though it sends you back to the empty stall. As evening gathers, you arrange your corner of the stall. You lay your cloak beneath you to blunt the chill of the floor and pull your pack close, using it as a pillow and guard for your few possessions. The air smells faintly of hay and animals, even though this part of the building is empty. The sounds of the farm settle into a slow rhythm as the light fades, the creak of a door, the low murmur of voices, the thud of a bucket set down on the ground. Then gradually, those sounds slip away, replaced by the quiet of night. You eat a small piece of bread, the last of what you've carried from the last village, and wash it down with water. The food is plain, but the act of eating in safety, of having walls around you, however thin, is a comfort all its own. Outside, the wind rises slightly, rattling the loose boards. You pull your cloak tighter, feeling the day's miles in your bones. The straw beneath you shifts as you settle deeper into your corner. The air is cool but steady, the night carrying no sign yet of rain. As you drift towards sleep, you think of the other travelers who must be settling in tonight. Some in barns like this, some in church porches, some in the open fields with nothing but the sky for a roof. You know that by dawn you'll all be moving again, scattering across the countryside in search of the next patch of shelter. But for now, here in your borrowed stall, you are still. You wake before the farm truly stirs. The stall is dim, the air cool but not biting. The boards above your head are dark silhouettes against the faint silver of early dawn. For a moment, you stay where you are listening. Somewhere nearby, a cow shifts heavily in its pen. A hen clucks softly as if speaking in her sleep. Beyond that, only the light hiss of wind threading through a loose board breaks the stillness. You push yourself upright, feeling the stiffness in your back and legs. It's the stiffness you've come to expect, the toll of miles walked, of nights spent on uneven floors. You shake out your cloak, fold it over your arm, and slip quietly into the yard. Frost crunches under your boots, crisp in the pre-sunlight gloom. The farmer is nowhere to be seen, though a thin curl of smoke rises from the chimney of the house. You think about knocking to say goodbye, but in the life of a traveler, departure is often better made without fuss. A nod of thanks the evening before is usually enough. The morning is for moving on. The road stretches ahead, pale and rutted, bordered on each side by hedges still bare from winter. The rising sun sets their tangled branches glowing faintly gold. The air smells faintly of wood smoke from distant cottages. You set a steady pace, letting the rhythm of walking loosen the stiffness in your limbs. By mid-morning, you crest a small rise and see a cluster of roofs ahead. It's not a village proper, just a scattering of cottages and outbuildings along the road. As you draw nearer, you hear the faint ring of a hammer, a smith at work. You pass his open doorway and catch a glimpse of him bent over his anvil sparks, leaping briefly in the dim light. He doesn't look up, but you know he's aware of you. In small places, nothing passes unnoticed. A few turns of the road bring you to a narrow bridge over a slow-moving stream. The water glints in the sunlight, its surface broken only by drifting leaves. You pause for a drink from your flask, letting the coolness of the water linger on your tongue. Ahead, the road curves toward a line of low hills, their slopes dotted with grazing sheep. The climb is steady but not steep, and the view from the top is wide fields, hedgerows, the faint shimmer of water far off. You take a moment to scan the land, noting the smudge of smoke to the east. Smoke means people, and people mean a chance, however small, for shelter. You head in that direction, the road narrowing into a track flanked by dry stone walls. Before long, you reach a small farmstead. A woman is hanging laundry on a line strung between two posts, the white cloth snapping lightly in the breeze. You greet her politely. She eyes you for a moment, then gestures toward a low shed near the barn. Not much in there, she says, but it's dry. You thank her and take a look. The shed is small, its walls rough-planked, the floor swept clean. A faint scent of stored grain lingers in the air. It would serve well enough if you end up here by nightfall. Still, the day is young, and you decide to press on. The road dips into a shallow valley where the wind drops, replaced by the quiet gurgle of a narrow brook. You follow it for a while, enjoying the soft give of grass under your boots after the hard ruts of the track. Along the way, you spot the remains of an old stone building, its roof long gone, its walls leaning inward. You step inside out of habit, noting how the sun slants across the moss-covered floor. In summer, such ruins might offer decent shelter. In winter, they're little more than a frame for the wind. By afternoon, clouds have begun to gather, their edges tinged with a hint of steel. You keep moving, knowing that finding shelter early is better than scrambling for it in the last moments of daylight. The land opens into broad pasture, broken here and there by stands of trees. You spot a lone figure ahead, a shepherd, his cloak wrapped tight, his dog at his side. You greet him, and he pauses long enough to offer a few words. "There's an old wayside hut half a mile on," he says, pointing with his crook. "Built for drovers. You'll see it." You follow his directions, and sure enough, the hut appears where the road bends. It's little more than a stone box with a pitched roof and a single narrow door. Inside, there's a bench along one wall, and a hearth, though no wood. The air is cool but still, and the roof seems sound. It's not much, but after days of barns, porches, and open fields, it feels almost like a gift. You set your pack down on the bench, claiming your space before the night. Outside, the wind picks up slightly, carrying the smell of damp earth and distant rain. You eat what little you have left in your pack, a crust of bread, a few bites of cheese, then step back inside and close the door against the growing chill. As night falls, the hut grows colder, but it's a steady cold, not the biting, shifting cold of the open air. You wrap yourself tightly in your cloak, leaning against the wall. The quiet here is deep broken only by the occasional sigh of wind under the door. You let it wrap around you, the sound becoming a kind of rough lullaby. You think of the shepherd's kindness in pointing you here, of the woman's offer of the shed, earlier in the day of the farmer's empty stall the night before. The road can be harsh, but it's threaded through with small mercies, each one a lifeline in its own quiet way. The bench is hard, the hut dim, but it's yours for the night. In the life of a poor traveler, that is a fortune. You wake in the wayside hut to the faintest blue light seeping under the door. The air inside is cool, and the stillness is deep enough that you can hear the small ticks of the timber as it eases in the morning chill. Your body protests the hardness of the bench, but there's a kind of relief in knowing the night passed without disturbance. You push the door open and step into a quiet world washed with dawn. The fields lie pale and silver with frost, and each blade of grass catches the early light as though dusted with ground glass. Your breath hangs briefly in the air before drifting away. For a moment, you just stand there feeling the openness around you, a reminder that you are once again a small moving point in a wide and watchful world. The track ahead is empty, curling between low ridges toward a horizon smeared with mist. You begin walking your boots, crunching softly in the frost, the sound swallowed quickly by the stillness. The cold is bracing at first, but with each step your body warms. The day feels promising, in the way that only a clear winter morning can, cold, yes, but steady with no immediate hint of rain or snow. A mile or two along, you come to a small copse of trees. The ground beneath is carpeted with a thick layer of leaves, their edges rimed with frost. You pause briefly, remembering other times you've used such places as shelter, the way the branches could block the worst of the wind, the way you could tuck yourself into the hollow between roots and vanish from sight. But on a morning like this, with the road open before you, you choose to keep going. The path bends toward a shallow valley where a stream runs fast and clear over stones. A narrow bridge crosses it, the boards damp and dark from the cold. On the far side, a line of cottages huddles close against the slope. Smoke drifts lazily from a few chimneys, and you catch the faint smell of baking bread. As you enter the little cluster, a dog trots toward you, tail low but wagging cautiously. You offer it a hand, and it sniffs before moving on, deciding you are no threat worth barking about. A woman sweeping her step glances up at you, her expression curious but not unkind. You greet her, and she nods once before returning to her work. There's no sign of a tavern here, no inn, but you note a small barn at the edge of the cottages. The doors are open, revealing a pair of donkeys in their stalls. The smell of straw and animal warmth reaches you, and you make a quiet mental note: if the night comes without better prospects, this barn could be your refuge. Beyond the cottages, the road climbs gently again. The sky has brightened fully now, the frost softening under the pale sun. Your shadow lengthens ahead of you, a silent traveling companion. The miles pass quietly until the land begins to open into rolling pasture dotted with sheep. Far off, a single figure moves slowly across the slope, a shepherd, his dog at his heels. When you draw near, he hails you with a nod. Cold night, he asks, his voice carrying easily in the open air. You answer honestly, and he grins faintly. There's a drover's hut up the road, he says. Empty, far as I know. You thank him and follow his directions. The hut appears soon after, low, stone-built, with a roof of slate and a single narrow window. The door sticks a little, but you shoulder it open to find a space swept clean with a rough hearth at one end. A few scraps of kindling lie in the corner, left by some thoughtful soul. You don't linger just yet, the day is still ahead of you, but you leave your pack in the hut to mark it as yours for the night, then set out in search of food. A small village lies another mile along the road, its market square busy with stalls. You buy a heel of bread and a small piece of cured meat, dearer than you'd like, but worth it for the nourishment. Back at the hut, the afternoon sun is already dipping. You arrange your corner cloak spread on the bench pack tucked close. You set the bread and meat beside you, knowing they'll be your supper. Outside, the light thins to a wash of gold, then to the soft gray that always precedes night in winter. As you eat, the wind begins to rise, whistling faintly around the hut's edges. The slate roof holds steady, and the walls block the worst of it. You chew slowly, savoring the salt of the meat, the plain comfort of the bread. You know it won't keep you warm, but it will keep you steady. Night falls in layers. The wind deepens in tone, carrying the faint smell of distant wood smoke. You hear nothing else but the occasional rustle outside, perhaps a rabbit, perhaps only the shifting of the grass. Inside, the darkness is complete, save for the faintest trace of moonlight at the window. You lie back on your cloak knees, drawn up for warmth, and let the silence seep into you. The bench is hard, your cloak thin, but the knowledge that you have walls and a roof between you and the night air is enough. As your eyes close, you think about how each day's walk brings its own search, its own small gamble between exposure and shelter. Some nights the gamble pays well, others you take what you can and endure. Tonight, the drover's hut is your prize plain empty, but yours for the dark hours ahead. You wake in the drover's hut to the faint glow of first light pressing at the narrow window. The wind has quieted in the night, leaving the air inside still and cool. You sit up slowly, stretching against the stiffness in your back, your breath pale in the chill. The slate roof held against the gusts, and the walls kept the frost at bay, small victories you don't take lightly. The world outside is muted under a thin veil of morning mist. The fields are pale and damp, each blade of grass tipped with dew. You step out, letting the cool air settle around you. For a moment, you stand in the hush, aware of the long miles behind you, the many corners of the countryside you've borrowed for sleep. The road today is gentle, winding through low pasture land, where sheep graze in the early light. Their bells chime softly as you pass. A narrow stream runs beside the road, its banks soft and damp from recent rain. You follow it, knowing streams often lead to villages, mills, or bridges, the kind of places where a traveler can find both human presence and sometimes a roof. By mid-morning, you come upon a small hamlet clustered at a bend in the water. A mill wheel turns lazily in the current, its creak and splash the only loud sounds in the quiet. You pause to watch it a moment, the steady motion oddly calming. The air smells faintly of flour and damp wood. You greet a man stacking sacks near the mill door, asking after the road ahead. He tells you of a larger village a few miles on, one with an alehouse and a church worth seeing. You thank him and continue your steps, lightened by the promise of both food and possible shelter. The track to the larger village leads through open fields where the hedgerows have been cut back for winter. The wind moves freely here, brushing cold fingers against your face. By the time the village comes into view, the day has begun to dip toward afternoon, the light softening around the edges. It's larger than most places you've passed lately, a main street lined with timber-framed houses, a handful of shops, and as promised, a low-roofed alehouse with a painted sign swaying gently in the breeze. You step inside to the smell of roasting meat and wood smoke. The warmth is immediate, and the low hum of voices makes you acutely aware of your own quiet. You buy the cheapest fare, a slice of bread, a small wedge of cheese, and a mug of small beer, and take a seat near the fire. The heat seeps into your fingers, and for a brief moment you feel almost still. You ask the alehouse keeper carefully about lodging for someone with little coin. He glances at you, weighing his answer, then suggests the church porch. It's deep and dry, he says. No one will turn you out there. As evening settles, you make your way to the church. It stands at the edge of the village green, its stone walls worn smooth by centuries of wind and rain. The porch is as deep as the keeper promised, with a heavy wooden bench built into one wall. You set your pack down and sit, letting the quiet settle around you. The last light fades, and the village closes in on itself. Doors shut, shutters drawn, the sounds of work replaced by the occasional bark of a dog or the faint cry of a child. You eat the rest of your bread, slowly washing it down with water from your flask. The bench is hard, but the roof above keeps off the wind, and the stone walls block the worst of the chill. You think back over the many places you've slept, the damp ruins, the haylofts, the corners of strangers' cottages, the byres and barns and empty huts. Each one offered its own blend of safety and discomfort, its own small relief from the road. And though none of them were permanent, each became yours for a night, part of the quiet ledger of survival you carry in your mind. The stars emerge slowly in the gap beyond the porch. You pull your cloak tighter and rest your head against your pack. Somewhere in the village, a bell tolls the hour. The sound is slow and deep, fading into the darkness. You close your eyes, letting the weight of the day's miles fall away. Tomorrow the road will open again before you. It will offer new miles, new uncertainties, new quiet corners where you might rest. But tonight, the porch is yours. Dry, sheltered, and still enough to see you through until the first light returns. The night settles fully now, and with it comes a quiet so complete that even the faintest sounds, the creak of the wooden bench, the soft stir of air moving through the porch, seem larger than they are. You sit still wrapped in your cloak, feeling the weight of the miles you've walked dissolve into the darkness. The cool stone at your back is solid and unmoving, a reminder that for this one night at least, you have a place that will not shift beneath you. Your eyes trace the dim shapes around you, the curve of the arch above the faint silver edge of the bench, the shadowed doorway that leads into the silent church. Somewhere far off, a dog barks once, then twice, then falls quiet. The sound only deepens the sense of stillness. You think of all the nights behind you, each one different, yet bound together by the same quiet need to find shelter, however humble. The ruined barns, the haylofts, the huts by the road, they blur together now into one long thread, a steady rhythm of searching and finding, leaving and walking on. Here, in this moment, there's nothing left to search for. You've arrived at least until morning. The air is cool but calm. Your pack rests against your side. The world beyond the porch feels far away, as if the road itself is sleeping too. You draw your cloak closer, letting the edges tuck under your chin and close your eyes. The sounds grow softer, more distant. The darkness wraps itself around you, holding you steady, holding you warm enough. And with that, you drift the night your blanket, the road your dream.